Hey everyone. Okay. Hello, FFF. I'm a duck. I am swimming, but I decided to show up. And yes, I had a feeling this was going to happen. So I just want to make sure that you can hear me. I have come scooted onto my desk on wet socks. I didn't want to make an excuse and cop out. So at the beginning, everything was a bit hectic. I didn't get my act together on time to be on time. It was either be late or on time. Long story short, I'm here. I don't know for how long. I am so happy that you can hear me. That is a major step in the right direction. And if you hear anything else, that's the pups trying to settle down as well. It's been rather hectic. Anywho, Fernanda, thank you so much for being here. AMC, I appreciate having you here as well. Now, I would like to actually just go and dive right into the subject. And I would like to use all my fancy kit and caboodle that I can, but I'm rather limited. So my big disclaimer right now, if I get cut off suddenly, it is because my power has gone off again, all right? Then we're going to revisit this. This live will then go private. Anybody watching on replay wondering if something's going on, I will private this video. I will then put out a disclaimer on my community tab, etc. And I will revisit this on a video or another live. I do not want to bore you. Buongiorno, Italia, ciao, ciao bello, ciao bella. Thank you so much. Now, enough of that jibber jabber. I have to make sure that I've got all my ducks in a row, literally. Let me get rid of a few tabs here so that I don't get mixed up. And yes, I am shaking because there's one thing I do not like, and that is being late, whether it is to a party or to a live stream, which has everything to do with me being here and you being here. So I appreciate having you here. Thank you so very much. Now, I know that many of you watching this now, being here with me or on the replay, are going to say, yeah, I know all of this, but I figured that either put this in a video and go into lengthy explanations. Some topics are just gems for live streams. And I'm going to pull up a document that I have open. I did save all of this into images, but in case I need to make corrections on the fly, because that is what we have been doing in the past as well, corrections on the fly, that I want to be able to do them right then and there, because if we get lucky and get through this whole thing, this whole rigmarole without getting cut off, then I want the information out there to be correct. It's been a long time since I myself have delved into the whys, the hows, the intricacies of the name tags that we have on our orchids, or that we maybe should have on our orchids. So I am referencing an article that I looked up, well, I had in my files from a while ago, which I will link in the description once the live is done, whichever it is. But it is from the Atlanta Orchid Society. That is my reference for this live. I will be reading a lot of their text as well. And just as well, I wasn't trying to be a hero and do it all off by head, because my mind right now is a bit of a mess. So anyway, let me just get into the introduction as to why I'm doing this, and not just because of the information, but you know, here's the thing. It's not only when you are new to the orchid hobby that orchid names are daunting. You know, maybe as the years go by and as we grow our orchids for longer, we all have picked up on the names that we have in our collection, and then we settle in to live with what is on the tag. So knowing the breakdown of labels could be considered secondary. However, in my case, and not just because I have a channel, but I'm just sort of curious, this has always been my downfall, curiosity. Depending on where the rabbit holes of such curiosity could lead me, it could be a downfall or a blessing. But yeah, orchid tags. Oh boy. Anywho, not just knowing what our orchids are called, but learning these names can be rewarding, a challenge, an eye-opener, and after a short time, the names of many other orchids become secondary in nature. Sorry, Let me rephrase that, qualify that. Second in nature. It also helps to know orchid names when it comes to shopping for our orchids. So if the name of the orchids listed are in actual fact written correctly. So as a newcomer to when I saw orchids actually had names instead of just pretty blooms up in trees, I was real straight away into this whole topic, because if I'm going to spend my money, I want to spend it wisely. I want to know that I'm getting what I'm getting, and we'll get to the getting part. Nothing is ever guaranteed. So because not many nurseries respect the correct identification of the orchids they have for sale. And I'm not referring to an orchid being mislabeled because they got the actual name wrong. Mislabeling of orchids at the point of sale is more common than we think, and at first glance, maybe not so obvious, unless we know the breakdown of a label and also which orchid is being wrongly labeled. Never mind the why, but the one why is the right name so important for a hobby grower, even if you're not planning to take any of your orchids to a show? Like myself, for example. Because should you find yourself in the lucky position of growing an orchid and be able to take it to a show to get judged, then the correct name is a must. But for the likes of myself, I have no intentions of ever taking an orchid to a show, so why bother? Anyway, in my case, personally, I'm just picky like that. I want to know how it is, why it is. And sometimes I want to also know why it was given the name it was given, but that information is rarely available if you're talking about hybrids. Anyway, it is important to know that we trust what we have, what we buy, because it leads to the culture. The culture of an orchid is important, not only so it doesn't die where we're at, our research, we can back it up better, and our culture is also important to get an orchid to bloom. Hey, Brea. Hey, sweetie. Good to have you. Thank you so much for being here. So there comes two things. One thing, we have to get the culture right for it to bloom. Now, let me just go back. It's difficult enough to shop an orchid online, but if the label is not correct, and yet we trust that it is, our culture could be completely wrong. And that could be the case if an ID is totally wrong, when the orchid tags get placed according to what the vegetative growth resembles, and someone at the nursery takes an educated guess, puts a loose label into something that appears to be, about right. And an example of that could be the novelty phals, the summer bloomers, which have very similar foliage. And well, here's a loose tag, so let's put it in the pot that doesn't have a tag. The similarities of the leaves lead the way. The thing is, when this happens and you happen to get yourself a mislabeled orchid, you may not get that orchid to bloom. So you see how this all already starts at the point of sale. Now, the orchid may still grow well, and maybe the summer bloomers were a bad example because, if we treat summer bloomers right, they will bloom simply based on their foliage. It gives us a big sign. But let's just say in my case, I bought a trichopelia, and it could be a bulbophyllum. So that's two different genus. Now, I am, for the last 4 years, treating it like a trichopelia. I have not gotten it to bloom. Okay, we can talk setback, etc., etc. That's a total different subject, but you see where the problem already starts. Never mind, at least whatever I've got in the pot, it's doing fine. The rot has stopped, and now maybe it can get its grow on and eventually bloom. But if I keep if I have an orchid that I think I've got, I'm treating it according to what I've got. And then we can sit there and say, my XYZ won't bloom. It is possible you actually do not have XYZ, and until it doesn't bloom, you won't know. So, frustration compounds. And that is all only one example of why we need to know our labels, or even the point of sale needs to get the labels right. That's not being picky. That is something, every orchid grower wants, is to grow the orchid well. But you see, that is just the example of mislabeling based on a completely wrong ID. And oftentimes nurseries do not complete the name tag to include the complete name of the orchid. So we've just got the culture issue out of the way. Now we've got the nursery giving us another curveball, and they don't actually complete the name of the orchid on the tag, or the tag is faded. But many reasons why this happens is that some tags are digitally printed and the space where the names get filled in is too short. So it cuts the name off. There may be other reasons, as in human resources. I'm not going to judge anyone for being lackadaisical, so we won't go there. We can pretty much conclude that older tags, the names wear off, and it is an educated guess as to the identity of the orchid on the bench based on what letters are still visible. In the box it goes, that'll do it, it's good enough, whatever. And then as a grower, again, we're left to deal with it. Now, so far, we're only looking at, the repercussions of a wrongly or mislabeled orchid. But when it comes to purchasing an orchid, it is also very important to have the correct ID and full ID, especially when it is an expensive purchase. A named cultivar, for example, or a named cultivar that has awards attached to it, or let's escalate that even further, a rare orchid that is difficult to acquire that has a named cultivar with awards attached to it. Every little component on a tag can add to the price tag. And this information is really important to have on the tag, especially if the orchid is for sale. We want to know what we are buying and why the price is the way it is. Is it a variety? Was it actually sourced from, out in nature? Don't do it, but divisions like that exist. Is the tag actually identifying the orchid by its synonym? Like a bulbophyllum disciflorum versus a Trias disciflora. That is also important because seeing as the stakes are high when it comes to many coveted orchids, for that top dollar, the least I can expect as a consumer is for the vendor to ensure that the tag states everything that this orchid is about and why, well, to justify its price. Now, the synonym part could work in the consumer's favor. Anyway, I'll get to that. So as a consumer, going to orchid shows, orchid festivals, usually you should be getting orchids that have the whole rigmarole of the name on the tag. If you don't, now it's a good time for you to know what the tags of orchids should look like, because if you are in the know, then you may find yourself a great deal because you see something that is priced lower than it should be, and it is possible it comes under the synonym. And if it is the synonym and not all the rigmarole of the previous things that I've mentioned, it could be, now I'm not saying that vendors don't know what they're selling, but sometimes mistakes happen, as we know, with how tags get misplaced into different pots, and boom, you have yourself a mislabeled orchid. And with all the renaming that is going on, it is human error that can identify a gem, and all of a sudden you're not paying top dollar, but you're walking home with a huge grin on your face, basically because you knew your tags. Okay, so let's see. Having just gone through all of that, there are so many reasons for getting an orchid identification right. And the last one just mentioned being the best of all, because we have to see beyond a scribble and then hopefully come home with a gem. So when shopping for orchids, the tag, if written correctly, will tell you you are dealing with a species, a primary hybrid, or a complex hybrid. And all that without even looking at any care requirements. By the way, do I still have my trichopelia? Yes, in inverted commas, do I have a trichopelia? Yes, I do. Am I sure it is one? No. So it's doing okay. Right now it's living la vida because my orchids are in perpetual darkness all the time. Dendrochilum is now phylogeny. I'm going to have to look that up. I can't say that off the top of my head. It would all depend on which one. The whole genus, orchids by the lake? The whole genus? Interesting. Note to self, rabbit hole. So anyway, before we even look at the care requirements, at least our eyes have done the shopping. Now, again, depending on how long or how far I get with this live, how long it takes, maybe we can have a debate afterwards when it comes to pronunciation of names. How important is pronunciation, and does pronunciating an orchid name wrong, does that tarnish the credibility of the grower? I hope we have time for that. And of course, being interactive, I really want to hear your point. Anyway, that's just, a side note, but that could be another live altogether. It's just that as I go through what I have gotten from the Atlanta Orchid Society, I want to make sure that as I pronounce things, somebody may pronounce it differently. And across the network of the YouTubes, we hear a lot of pronunciations. And that could also just be the way the languages are going. My background is German. Well, I studied Latin. Then there comes the Spanish. Then there comes the French. And there's English. So basically, when it comes to covering orchid names, if I'm pronunciating something wrong, it is basically, maybe a cultivar because I don't know the name, how it's pronounced locally, or my dyslexia coming in and I start to flip the letters. Something that was in preparing this, the screens that I'm going to show you now, I was like, Nina, get a grip, get a grip. You know this. I was just dusting off the cobwebs in my head. Anyway, having said all that, let's go. Let's get in down to the rabbit hole. How do orchid get their names? So from a long, long time ago, once upon a time, back in the day, orchid species, of course, are named by botanists who know a great deal about the plants, usually about one small group of orchids. And when someone collects an orchid that looks different than what is known, it is sent to a taxonomist, a person who knows plants in infinite detail. That would not be me. I'm not a taxonomist. Now, if the plant is really different than any plant previously known, it is given a name, and often one that reflects something about the flower or where the orchid was found or after the original collector. This is the specific name. The taxonomist then tries to place that plant within a group of other plants closely related, which that group of plants is then called the genus. Taxonomists have been separating out the species, but opinions change from time to time, as we well know, and so do the resulting species names. So that's why we have long lists of many, many orchids that we could buy. Anyway, eventually most orchid names were accepted, and back in the day, they were standardized by commercial growers and hobbyists. So they were standardized by commercial growers and hobbyists. It wasn't until DNA analysis had changed the way we see species now came in. It was not by science. People had a look-see and said, yeah. Then they had a committee. They came together, had a powwow, and more people had a look-see. And that's how they determined the names and standardized them. So now, however, instead of examining flower and plant structure, a portion of an orchid's DNA is analyzed and compared to other species. And this is why things have been going a little bit cuckoos on the names front, and orchids have been shifting around. As just now, Joshi mentioned, we don't have Dendrochilum, we now have a larger group of phylogeny. But anyway, I'll look into that. That was super, super interesting. And that is exactly how fast these changes happen. So, of course, the DNA analysis is going to get even more intricate, and brace yourself for the future name changes that are coming, or orchids getting shifted around. Anyway, except for natural occurring hybrids, orchid hybrids are man-made and consist of the genus name and the hybrid name, and that is usually chosen by the hybridizer. For example, Cattleya, Circle of Life. I hope that has some kind of a homage, a nod to the Lion King. I hope that, maybe something bronzy in that bloom. I wouldn't know. Anyway, having said all that, orchids are divided into two groups, and that would be species and hybrids. So let me just see that. I know that was a long-winded introduction, but I need to sometimes put information out because people would ask why I'm not going to a show. Well, that's not the only reason why we shouldn't know our orchid's name. We should also know it because, for example, the cost, or if we find a gem, or etc., etc. Everything I've just mentioned. So back in the 1700s, this is how old this goes back. We have ourselves a fabulous guy called Linnaeus, and he was the one that started the traditional binomial nomenclature. That's how old this whole thing is. Now, let's go to the first name tag. Okay, let me make sure I find myself in exactly where I want to be. And here we have our first name tag where it's pretty straightforward. We see this often. If we see it often, fantastic. And many of us know this is a species, but why? Because this is important as we go down how tags evolve based on what information is going to go on the tag. Hey, Mary, thank you so much. I appreciate that feedback. And I hope everything is clear at your end of the screen. I've just kind of had to jump onto this live quickly. I feel totally unprepared, but we're going to make the most of it. And I hope that the information is going to be of interest. Anywho's, while I stumble through the commentary. But anyway, so we're looking at the tag here and we're saying, yep, that's a species, because if we know our tags, we can see that the letters are in italics. And the italics is important as we move down with everything that can fit on a tag, because once again, you don't need to know your care requirements if you're looking for an orchid just to see whether the value and the money you're about to pay matches what you see on the tag. Now, of course, we need to know care requirements if we're going to buy it, but just by looking at the tag, we can see what's going on. So we have a Cattleya mossiae. It's a species. The letters are in italics. That is not just the genus name that is in italics, that is the species name in italics, and it is only a species name that goes in italics. On top of that, it is lowercase. So this is a clear example of a species tag. There's no other strings attached. Then we'll move on. I just wanted to add that Mr. William Catley was the one who first established an exotic orchid collection, and he owned one of these first orchids that he brought over from Brazil. And when his orchid bloomed, he sent it to Dr. John Lindley, who's an orchidologist. I feel I've lost my calling. I would love to have had the opportunity to become an orchidologist. I didn't even know that existed, but here we are. And he sent that to be analyzed. And seeing as he was the only one at the time, this species was named after him. There was no other Cattleya recognized or having been seen back in the day. So Mr. Catley had his own species, a genus named after him, Cattleya. And we're still doing all the Latin stuff. There's a lot of Latin in this. But you see here for the pronunciation, I would say mossiae. I wouldn't know how other people say it, and I could be completely wrong, but that's secondary. It's just a little add-on as we go through. Now, when we get to the next, let me make sure that I'm actually sharing everything. Yes. We can also very clearly see, again, simple that the Catrianae, Paphiopedilum bellatum, Dendrobium aphyllum, just, some examples where you see that everything is in italics. That defines this as a species. You don't even have to know anymore if you see a tag like this, if the letters are in italics. Now, here's the thing. When we buy an orchid online, or let's just say anywhere, let's just say we buy an orchid and they've got tags, you will see species with no italics. The reason you can identify it's a species if the person wasn't doing their due diligence by making the tag and putting everything in italics, this is time consuming. And if you've got thousands to tag, so the reason you can identify a species orchid on a tag, even if the letters are not in italics, it is because the first letter of the second name is in lowercase. That is 20 hours. And that's my boyfriend here telling me what time it is. I'm sorry. I really should mute him before we go on. No, leave it. I'm losing track. The lowercase of the second name determines that it is a species, whether the tag is in italics or not. So, ideally, this is what you want to see buying a species orchid. But if you know that you're looking at a lowercase, you're still getting a species orchid. The moment the first letter of the second word goes to a capital letter, that determines that it is then a cultivar. And that means you're not getting a species. Now, you see how important it is already when you're shopping and you're in the nursery going after bench after bench. And if somebody didn't care, and let's say somebody didn't know any better, they would get Cattleya trianae. The T would be a capital letter. They would assume it's not a species. They would be paying top dollar, and they would ask themselves, why am I paying so much money? This orchid is not even a species. Now, I mean, I know it's orchid. I know it's orchid. Freudian slip there. I know it's awkward when we ask what we feel are dumb questions, but it doesn't have to be. But nurseries are busy, etc., etc. So there's a little bit of nitty-gritty little details as to identifying an orchid tag and writing an orchid tag out correctly. None of my tags in my collection have italics. Not the genus, not the species. Because it's time consuming. I know what I'm looking at because none of my second word, my species, none of the first letters are in capital letters. And that is how it is okay to do it that way as well. If I show it on videos, I would still be showing a species because I haven't made that letter capital. So that is an important detail. Yep, you're right. Most nurseries don't care. Okay, right, next thing. So let's go down to natural hybrids. Natural hybrids are pricey. And if we're not talking about natural hybrids from the wild, not anymore. But back in the day, that's the only way they came to where we have them now. They came from the wild. Natural hybrids obviously exist because of cross-pollination, and it works out where they live. So the tag looks a little bit different, but we're still in italics. We've got Cattleya crossed with Hardiana. We've got a genus with a species, but then we have a cross in here, which determines that it is a hybrid. The X should never, ever be in italics. It should always be straight up. So Cattleya hardiana is the correct label for the natural hybrid that is a cross between Cattleya dowiana, variety aurea, and Cattleya warscewitzii. Now, the second tag here is only there for demonstration purposes as to the two species that go into a hardiana. Hardiana obviously is a, in inverted commas, made up name. It could be, you would think, a capital letter, capital H. It is not, because we're talking about a cross between two species. So we have genus, a species, genus, a species, and this would be the tag. It could also read and this was what happens now more and more often, it could also read in parentheses Dawiana variety aurea with the X straight up, Warsavitzii, again in italics. That is also a commercial or even for a show, a kind of tag. It's acceptable, it is correct. If you ever see a tag that looks like this, that will show you it is coming from having been collected in nature. The division itself, whatever you're buying, is from an orchid, a parent, a specimen that has been divided. Then the tag should come like this, and this will shoot the price up exponentially simply because it is identifying that it's originally from the wild, whatever division you've got. And I hope it is a division. I always get a little bit nervous when I say things like these because I don't want to make this an attractive tag to look for. What you should look for is the one down here, the one right underneath, because that would mean that we've got seedlings going on. It's from a flask, it's a juvenile, it's a flowering, or it can be specimen flowering size, it doesn't matter, but at least this one is still legal and properly done. This one is historic and super, super duper valuable. All right, now the next one here, for example, just as an example, because we've been talking about Cattleyas, we've got plenty of other genus in our gorgeous hobby. So a natural hybrid Dendrobium crossed with superbins would be there as well. We've got the genus superbins, and that would be, again, if it were collected in the wild, you would see the tag like that. However, it is a biggie bum crossed with a discolor. All right, so those are the parents together, and it could also be then shown in parentheses. I don't know if I've done that double. Yes, I've done it double. So you could also have the biggie bum and biggie bum. Bijibum. You see, I'm not concentrating. You can also have bijibum and discolor in parentheses with just the dendrobium. So that's another one of those natural hybrids, primary hybrids, crosses between two species. All of that is the way the tags should be looking at this stage. So when we come to species, including names, I've left a little text underneath just so that if I'm not saying it correctly, have a little bit of a backup. And if you read the text, maybe you will understand it better than what I'm going to say. So I've left that up for information purposes. It's coming directly from the Atlanta Orchid Society page. Once again, that link will be in the description. So we see a lot of times that we've got Phalaenopsis venosa or XYZ genus, the species, and then we've got names. And the names are always capital letters, first letter, capital letter, and upright. And this is because it is identifying the personal persons that describe a species, which helps to avoid confusion when the same name, as in Phalaenopsis venosa, was used to describe a different species. For example, if you've got Cattleya crispa, Lindley, I've finished that off so that we know who we're talking about, that Mr. Lindley saw Cattleya crispa. It is the accepted name for this species from southern Brazil, whereas Cattleya crispa beer, or bear, probably Dutch, is a synonym for Laelia marginata, L.O. Williams. This is all one name, okay? Laelia marginata, L.O. Williams would be all one name from the tag, and that is from northern Brazil, and yet he identified it from the north, which is a different variety, whereas crispa found it in southeastern Brazil. So that is why we then come across names. Now, why is that relevant? Well, it becomes relevant when we start to talk about synonyms. And that is when we come into species names that then include names at the end. Okay, so just as an example, and I found this, I wasn't going to change anything around from this article that I used as a reference back in the day because it made simple sense. It's just that I've put it into a visual with my tags here. So synonyms. This happens because, as we just saw, somebody identified a species in the north of a country or north of an area, wherever of the continent, not necessarily just the country, but something similar can exist in the south. And Lycaste has that situation. So this happens, usually the accepted name is for an orchid that was published first. So if you got first dibs, you found yourself first timer, and then you get it, analyzed and documented, and it actually has not appeared as such before, you've got first dibs, and then you get to name it. And here's a good example involves the genera Lycaste, Ida, I say Ida, it could be Ida, but Ida and Pseudomeri Lycaste. So here we have, and I'm just going to just preempt, the dates at the back. They do not belong on the tag. That's why I've grayed them out. Okay, they are reference for the visual of what I'm about to say. So, Lycaste was described originally by John Lindley in 1843 and included many species ranging from Mexico to South America. Then along came Anne Ryan and Henry Oakley in 2003, and they reclassified a section of Lycaste predominantly from South America with cream, green, or tan yellow flowers and created the genus Ida. Now, we can see that Lindley found some Lycaste in South America. And then, of course, Ryan and Oakley found some in South America, but they thought they had found something different because they've never seen them in green, cream, or tan flowers. So they assumed this is a new genus, and they started to document it. This name, having been widely accepted and in use for many years before people found out that Morales Arquila described the section as the genus Pseudomeri Lycaste a few weeks before the Ryan and Oakley publication, thus making Ida a synonym of the genus Pseudomeri Lycaste. Now, that, my peoples, is why we have synonyms. Because everybody and their uncle were outside checking for orchids, and whoever got their documents in first and their classifications, and then it turns out another paper was discovered, etc., etc. And besides, this is why I find it so important. For example, if you are shopping and let's just say there is a Pseudomeri Lycaste that is super, super expensive. I wouldn't know. I'm just, hypothetical. But you know that the Ida is a synonym of Pseudomeri Lycaste, and it is possible that the person selling that super duper rare Ida doesn't know that he has a Pseudomeri Lycaste. He's got the name Ida, and it goes as a normal regular Lycaste, and you know this is a synonym of Pseudomeri Lycaste. This is a precious orchid. This is a steal. This is mine. Muy importante. Now, I'm not fortunate enough to go to orchid festivals, but can you imagine, can you see the importance of knowing the tags even as you shop? That was an eye-opener to me back in the day when I was going down this rabbit hole, trying to make sure that I know my names, I know which orchids were coming, and getting familiar with them even before they arrive. For me, it was all fun. It was part and parcel of the anticipation of my orchids. Now, I'm not particularly a Lycaste fan, but this example just shows you how synonyms start to derive and who then adopts what. However, when it comes to accepted names, if you are not sure, you can always go to the RHS name registration. Sometimes they clash with what Kew Gardens has to say, but they are the authority according to my latest information. The RHS is still the authority. I just like to refer to Kew a little bit more. I find their information is easier to find, and the clashes are so minimal, it really doesn't make a big difference here or there. So this is how a tag should look if you have a species tag with the species including names. So you have Lycaste, never mind the dates, they have been grayed out, but you can see the dotted line around the lower tag. Anne Ryan and Henry Oakley, they thought, well, the records showed when they put their dibs in, the records didn't show Morales Arquila had already preempted them in the same year. And for many, many years, this information was not readily available. But because he came first, despite people having already accepted the Ida name, sorry about that, guys. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit of protest down here. But because the Ida name had already been widely accepted, that made it a synonym. It wasn't like they were just going to delete it. So you will still see Lycastes, Sudameri Lycastes, listed as Idas. So here we have another example. We have a Sudameri Lycastes cinnabarina, for example. It can be Cinnabarina rolfe, as in Lycastes cinnabarina rolfe, but Rolfe then found it after the Cinnabarina was actually identified as a Sudameri Lycaste. And then, of course, Ida, Cinnabarina, Ryan, Oakley is a synonym of the other two. I hope that makes sense. I'm going to stop now because the rain has stopped. We may be lucky. Let me just check the chat. I don't want to just be babbling away here and people are throwing me like, what are you talking about? Mary G, I saw 3 pseudobulb Cattleya dowiana rosita for, oh, wow. Wow. Are they in your home now? Okay. Ooh, I can't. But anyway, plant prices are going up, and considering the circumstances over in the UK, yeah, I hope that is rooted in one and not, it sounds to me like that's just a division. Oh, wow. I'm getting quite warm just looking at that price. All right, let's go to the hybrid names as such and how they come across, when we talk about hybridization, that has already taken 173 years, if I calculated right. 173, back in the 1850s it started. We're somewhere there. I see so many articles that say over 150 years, and that is true if we're talking 173, but I also see a lot of articles that say for 100 years, and I think these articles need to be updated because we're moving along rapidly. Enter 2023. But anyway, so seeing as orchid hybridization has taken place for over 150 years, the first man-made hybrid was, according to the Atlanta Orchid Society, Calanthe dominii. Okay, so he registered his, and that is when you have a hybrid with a name that is actually a human name. And it is so nice when we get these kinds of names because then we can actually Google dominii, but then we sort of go down another rabbit hole as in who is he, why did he do it, and what inspired him to do it. Questions I ask myself, I just don't get answers for, but yeah. So this is what you see, and you can see that the species, the Calanthe, is in italics, and in this case you can see that the second name is upright and it is capitalized. So we've gone away from all italics, which identifies species. We are now into the next phase of another version of how an orchid tag should read properly. And if you get funky names like dominii, you will probably think, yes, that is a person that did it. But when you see small world, you will wonder, why on earth is that small world? Who did this? And why did he give it that name? Anyway, we all know Dendrobium roy tokunaga. There you go. Very, very classic name of a genus. And then the name of the orchid is named after the originator, the hybridizer. Okay, now when it comes to complex hybrids, all right, so now we're getting a little bit more into the meat and bones of a tag. That's why I think many people like their species, because they're easy to read. The minute you see something like this, and we're going to focus on the top tag because the bottom two reflect what is on the top. We're going to focus, you know, when you see Red Emperor, you're like, oh. Now, this is going to be, you know, when it comes to researching its care, what does it like, blah, blah, blah. All of a sudden, we have to deal with ancestors, and then we have to consider how much percentage of which ancestor is in the, anyway, because that is important for culture. But you see here, we have two species, and I'm sorry, yeah, but sorry, here's a complex hybrid. I'm going back. Sorry, I was just flipped back with my eyes. So here's a complex hybrid, and they are called complex for a reason, because they are a hybrid of two other hybrids. So we have the Benicujaku and the New Comet. They, each of them, have another parentage line. So the family tree is getting a little bit more extensive. All right, the pyramid, the triangle shape is broadening the minute we get into complex hybrids. And, you know, normally these complex hybrids are bred for ease of care, which is also nice when you look at a tag like this. And let's say you don't know much about orchids, even the tag with the name, just a hybrid name like that, Domini Roy Tokunaga. When you see tags that are a species determined by italics, and then, you know, the rest of the letters are straight, you can pretty much guarantee that it is going to be vigorous, lots and lots of blooms, possibly long-lasting blooms, possibly with a fragrance, compact growing. You know, these are all attributes that hybridizers want in their hybrids to make them easy to grow for everybody. So you know, let's just say you don't know anything about orchids, but you know your orchid tags. You stumble across a tag like this, you can really feel confident that this orchid was bred to be able to be grown in a home environment without needing that many bells and whistles. That is from, let's say, X-ray vision, to look through and a dendrobium name, to look through the name of a tag and understand what is behind it. And then, you know, you can rest easy when you look at tags like this and say, yeah, maybe I won't have long-lasting blooms, but maybe they are potently fragrant, or, you know, it's a compact grower that fits into my space, etc., etc. So that is when you get into complex hybrids. Make no mistake, though, that not every complex hybrid, let's say dendrobium, and I'm sorry I only use those examples, but make no mistake, a hybrid doesn't necessarily mean that because it's a dendrobium complex hybrid or it's a phalaenopsis complex hybrid, doesn't mean that the orchids are all the same. They do have their own kind of little quirks. Some are vigorous root producers, and when it comes to hybrids, some may not be that vigorous root producers because the emphasis was on getting blooms and getting fragrance. So make sure that you don't think, yeah, that's a, you know, 100% guarantee I'm going to take this home and it'll be fine. We still have to do our homework, but at least the tag gives us some information as to what we are up against, as opposed to anything complicated. So a complex hybrid tag can also read like this. Because we're dealing with the same species, we're going to put the two hybrid names into parentheses with an X, and everything is bolt upright, no italics. Whereas we saw previously with the Cattleya example, the two species were in parentheses and they were in italics because species, all right? So if you see a tag like this in parentheses, you know you have yourself two dendrobium complex hybrids mixed together, another complex hybrid resulted. So this tag is also correct. And then the whole thing is called a Grex, right? So if you then look at it and somebody says my Grex is, then you say, okay, when you know that there's been a combination of many, many, many orchids to bring forth a grex. Now, we are getting into a little bit more of the, we're not quite at the bone marrow stage yet. I'm not sure. We'll have to wait and see. I've forgotten. But we're getting even deeper into tags. So we have cultivar hybrids. And they would read as follows. You've got the genus, then you've got the grex, and then you've got something that goes into parentheses at the end with a capital letter at the front. That is the cultivar. That means somebody grew a beautiful Dendrobium Red Emperor, took it to a show, the judges were impressed, and that person was allowed to name it. And it was then officially registered as such. From that moment on, only that orchid is allowed to be called Red Emperor Prince. There could be a gazillion other Red Emperors around, but only that orchid could be called Red Emperor Prince until the person divides the orchid, and then the division has the original name Red Emperor Prince, and so on and so forth. And then, like, for example, if I had my hibiki, I took it to a show, everybody was so marveled about it. I don't know what I would call it, but I could change my tag to then just say hibiki XYZ. And nobody else would be able to call their hibiki XYZ because that's not how the award system works. I got the award. And if you want an hibiki XYZ, then you need a division from my orchid, and that's how you can then perpetuate it and get it out to more people. Same with Cymbidium voodoo Halloween, genus grex and cultivar. I thought it was brilliant when I saw that. Cymbidium voodoo, fantastic blooms, and somebody had a spectacular specimen or whatever and called it Halloween. How fitting. And in my case, I thought, why not add something that I've got? A Cattleya Siamese doll kiwi. So we got plenty of Siamese doll out there, but there may only be ever so few kiwis depending how people divide it and pass it on. Not usually, forget that, scrap that. I don't like to talk about generalization, but in this case, I'm going to. I've lost my train of thought. I should have just stuck with usually. Anyway, I'll get back to that. Cattleya Siamese doll, kiwi, I was going to say. Usually something or other. It was important. I hope it comes back to me. If not, I'll leave it in the description. Yes, that is true. That is true. And that really, really annoys me because, I have a Neostylus loose Neary blue, which I would like to, if I show it one day, imagine getting that to have a prize. I would call it weirdo. No, but you're right. They don't. And this is the lazy way. And this is where you're sort of going back to the Google and, you have to see if it's written correctly somewhere or if you're getting what you're actually getting. And some don't even put it. And yet, you might get yourself a Cattleya Siamese doll and it turns out it is a kiwi. Again, maybe that's not relevant to many people as long as the orchid blooms. But if you were, for example, to take an orchid that has a cultivar that isn't even listed to a show, shame. Some people will tell you, you've got a cultivar here, it's already got a name, and then you walk away with your beautiful orchid and a very, very red face. At least I would. But yeah, maybe that is what I was trying to say. I still can't figure out what I wanted to say where I lost my train of thought, but I meant something. Cattleya Siamese doll, kiwi, and then I was going to say usually. But anyway, if I remember, it will be in the description. So here we are. Primary hybrids are as such. There's plenty of different ways of making them a primary hybrid. In this case, for example, I've got the Cinnabarina down here, which I shouldn't have, and for that reason we can make corrections. Cinnabarina is a species. We can have primary hybrid. Okay, delete, edit, out. The primary hybrid is not two species. That is a natural hybrid. Two species together, hybridized, is a primary hybrid, but a natural hybrid outdoors is a natural hybrid. There's a difference. Right. Getting to trade names. Cough, cough. This, in my opinion, never happens, and it should, because we are all going, what is my Phalaenopsis called? Why is it a trade name? And that was why they're so difficult to actually identify and find on the interwebs. Phalaenopsis, I'm going with these because they are so vast. We have a lot of them. Phalaenopsis mini deer is a trade name. The difference here is not because it is a cultivar, it is a trade name, but the first letters of each name have to be bigger than the letters that follow the name, and all the letters have to be capitalized, and that identifies mini deer. And I never see that happen this day and age. So if you are out and about and you see something like this, you know that your new Phalaenopsis is definitely a trade name, and you know at least somebody cared enough to put that into the details. Every name, if it was 3 or 4 names long, if a trade name is 4 names long, it doesn't matter. Every single letter at the front has to be marginally larger than anything that follows, and the entire trade name has to be in capitals. Right. Now, we're not done yet. And because I didn't want to ruin my tag, because this could get very, very long, but you see how much information can be, should be, could be on a tag, because not only all of the stuff that we've just mentioned, but we are also going to see orchids that have all these different abbreviations. I've got another little list going on down here that follow on after the cultivar name. Did I say that correctly? You see, I'm getting ahead of myself. Yes. This would then mean that this orchid is awarded, has had some kind of recognition, and there's a lot of different abbreviations that I've also listed. I mean, we see, I've put this in the tag HCC AOS. No, the trade names are not registered, and that is why you cannot find anything about them with regards to parentage, because they are so highly hybridized. This is the thing. That's why they should identify them the way they are identified as per, like this, full capital letters and larger first letters. And no, they are not registered. That is only registered by the person that is breeding that orchid, that wants to have that orchid exclusive with the name to their company, to their business, but they're not in the RHS or in Q or anything like that. It doesn't mean you can't show them. You can still go to the show with them, but you won't be able, they won't then say, oh yes, that Phalaenopsis now will go into the books. It just means you're going to get something pretty to take home, and, you know, makes you feel good when you got something like that. So there you go. Those are the awards that follow on, and every single award could then be added. I could then go with actually, hang on a second. The award society goes to the end, but I could do CM like that. It can go on and on and on and on. It's like being a list of doctors or something, you know. At the end usually goes the organization that has it then registered in their books according to the award offered and volunteered. Here, I mean, a lot of times we only see AOS. To be honest with you, I wouldn't even be able to tell you the German Orchid Society. Maybe I won't even guess. Deutsche Orchideenveranstaltung? I don't know. I wouldn't know. But every country probably has one. But a lot of us see AOS. And sometimes we see toga, which is from Taiwan, the Orchid Growers Association, because of course they have a lot going on there. They are the mecca of orchids and hybridizing and etc. and growing. And of course, Joga, you'll see that a lot. You will see that a lot with the neos. If you have, well, let's just say those neos are usually not on the market because they only get traded amongst connoisseurs within Japan. But if you have, let's say, a Neo-Phoenicia falcata, let's open another window, which also make sure I delete the right ones and not start from scratch. Neo-Phoenicia falcatas will appear as, see, I'm about to delete all that. I don't want to do that. Bear with me for a minute because we love our neos. We have so many falcatas out there. So, Neo-Phoenicia. We won't even see falcata. Gojo, come on. Fukurin. All right. And there are hundreds of them out there. All right. Now, these are some of the ones that are available, let's say, in our hemispheres. The prized ones won't be. These are not registered either because, yes, you have like a species, but because of the plethora of neos that have gone into a Gojo Fukurin, it is not going to be registered in RHS or anywhere else like that. I know this is a really, really bad stretch, but take the Neo-Phoenicia Gojo Fukurin. No, take the Neo-Phoenicias that we have out there. I've got 4 of them, not just the falcata, but 4 of the ones I could say Kibana, whatever, and use that the same way we just saw the trade name with a Phalaenopsis, even though Japan doesn't do that. But they cannot be registered because there is no way to trace back the parentage. So you won't see Neo-Phoenicia Gojo Fukurin or a Neo-Phoenicia Kibana in RHS. You will see Neo-Phoenicia falcata. All right. Now they're all falcatas, but it has become a little bit defunct when it comes to Neo-Phoenicias because Japan has a culture of their own. And I say that respectfully because I admire them. Meanwhile, Neo-Phoenicias are now Vandas, but let's just follow my train of thought here. But this, you won't find that registered, not even in Japan. Not the ruby ones, nothing, okay? So it's just a question of a connoisseur knowing what they're buying and, well, the really, 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 really precious ones, I don't think they ever hit the market when they come up for a division. But yeah. So you can see what I meant earlier with my long-winded introduction, if you made it all the way to the end, how complex and extensive name tag can get. Because if we were to take this and extend my name tags up here, if I could make them bigger, right? If I was to play around with this name tag would still have more added on to the end of it. And I do get an understanding of why nurseries that are selling orchids do not want to get into all of that. I absolutely get it. I understand it. But as a consumer, I am spending money. I want to know that I'm getting what I'm buying. And it's also very, very annoying when you see, for example, like Mary said, when you see that should be a cultivar and it's not. It's not in duck feet, so now what? I find it frustrating. Now, I might be making my life far too complicated, and bless those that don't really look into these things and say my orchid is in bloom. Fantastic. I really do admire that. I just don't have that personality. So yeah. Japan has its own Neo-Orchid Society. I am not surprised. Brazil has its own Laelia purpurata Orchid Society. And I bet that Japan is not accepting Vanda falcata. If they are, correct me. Correct me. I know if you're driving, Joshi, do not type. But, I cannot. I mean, I'm not even Japanese, and I'm protective about the Neo-Phoenicia maintaining the species status. I just can't. But yeah, here's another thing as well. When we are talking about Neo-Stylus, that is also in italics. When we're talking about Rhyncholalia cattleya, that is always in italics. And we can also have a Brassavola digbyana that is now reclassified into a Rhyncholalia digbyana. That is always all in italics. So even if a genus is changed, it doesn't change the fact that the Digbyana stays and maintains its species status. I can't believe I did that without drinking a single glass of water. I was so freaked out at the beginning. But yeah, I wonder if you felt ignored, if I was just jabbering away way too fast, and I would understand if you felt that way because, oh, like I said, I came in with wet socks because of the circumstances, but I didn't want to be late. I already had my phone out to put out a community post. So it all started a little bit primitive, which I'm not going to edit out. That's what live streams are for. This is the raw. This is the no edit version. Anyway, we would lose the chat if I were to edit it out. But having said all that, I'm wondering if anybody has any questions. Did I make sense? Didn't I make sense? Is there anything you would like to add? Because that would be awesome too. Put a little film music in the background. Guys, I have like a 10-second lag today. Don't want to have dead air. But I do want to give the opportunity if anybody wants to come up to join me up here and we can talk about this. We can also talk about pronunciation. The hint of pronunciation is pretty much your Latin and the origin of the name of the person the orchid was named after. And if that is not available, as in, for example, Small World that we saw, then Small World is English. So now we can talk about the pronunciation of somebody that says Small World in the UK as opposed to how they say it in the United States, and how somebody pronounces Small World in Kenya as opposed to Australia. It is still Small World. So the question is pronunciation in a nutshell, without going into major details. Latin, most of the time. In the case of Cattleya, it is the name of a person, so his name was Cattleya, and that's how you pronounced his name. So you just stick an A on the end to make it sound botanical. You call him Cattleya. You call the orchid species Cattleya, based on the fact that the name of the gentleman was pronounced Cattleya. So then we've got Cymbidium. I mean, we've just looked at Dendrobium. Those are basically your Latin bases. The same with voodoo. You know, if you go to the Caribbean, you'll hear it pronounced differently. But if you go, for example, with the name Brassavola, that is named after an Italian gentleman. So how do the Italians say Brassavola? That is how you pronounce the genus, because it was after a name, a surname of a gentleman, and we go with that as best as we possibly can. And of course, then you look at how many letters are in a name. Is it a fast S? Is it a slow S? Is it a single S? Double S is always a fast S. The single S is much more drawn out. So he wouldn't be Cattleya if it was with one T. He would be Cattleya, with as in cat. But when we have a double T, it goes faster. Cattleya. Cat as opposed to Cattleya. I hope that makes sense. The connotation, the enunciation, all that is somewhat based around where the name was originated. And this is what makes me also smile when I try to say names of my Rapiculus lalias or their origin, and they're in Brazil, and I don't do Portuguese very well. But in all fairness, I should learn how to say Minas Gerais in the Portuguese way to get it right, seeing as that is their origin, and there's a lot of orchids named as such. So my pronunciation as a European is completely wrong. But if we want to get into the nitty-gritty of pronunciation, then maybe there will be some feedback. Maybe I'll make a community post one day and see how we go. But all right, Anita. Oh, Anita, it's good to see you. Hands up in the air, waving wildly. It's good to see you. Right, if there is nothing else, then I would really want to say thank you so much for putting up with the somewhat haphazard beginning. It was very, very unprofessional. But yeah, that's me. That is me. I would like to also say thank you so much for being here. Hey, Sandy. Good to see you. Hope you're keeping warm, lady. Oh my goodness, I saw. I couldn't find the comment to reply to you, but oh girl, stay warm, please. Oof, that sounds like frostbite temperatures. But anyway, I want to thank you all for coming. Really appreciate your time, your support. If you haven't liked the stream or disliked the stream, please do so on your way out. And anything else that comes to mind after this, once the video is live, is away from private and is actually processed, please leave that in the comments and we can address it in further detail. Until then, you're very welcome, Mary. I really appreciate it. I wish I could have sat here for 10 minutes, like I do normally. That was not the case. But anyway, thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you, Fernanda. You too. Now that the rain has stopped, I wish I had started about now. Oh, P.S. Tomorrow we're having a birthday party. We are having an orchid seedlings birthday party. So, okay, for replay people, that is the next live in the page, if you look at it. Tomorrow, but we will be celebrating seedlings tomorrow, 1 year, and how they got to that point. So if you can make it, it'd be good to see you there. We're just really gonna have a party. Take care, everybody. Much love to you, hand hearts and all that fun stuff. Stay safe. Bye.